In this unit, I want to talk about marketing communication ethics. We'll look at some examples of things that are questionable, talk about some of the gray areas that companies sometimes encounter when they're making marketing decisions. I want to point out the difference between morals and laws, and I challenge you to look at your own ethical behavior. First, an example. I received this at my company. Now, you'll have to excuse the way the envelope was opened and the handwriting on it that says ethics. That's my handwriting. It was just a notation to myself to remember to talk about this. But let's look at what it is. It was an envelope we received, and it looks like it's our Yellow Page advertising bill. There's the logo for the Yellow Pages. It says payment information enclosed. It looks like an official bill. And when you open it up, here's the invoice. You can pay by credit card or by check and have several options to choose from. They want you to verify that your listing information is correct, and you can see that the bill is for an annual amount of $293. It also comes with a return envelope in case you choose to pay by check. So it looks like our Yellow Page bill, right? Well, wrong. I've blown this up so you can read the fine print a little bit better, but look what it says right in the middle of this copy. This is not a bill. This is a solicitation. You are under no obligation to pay the amount stated above unless you accept this offer. This is a marketing piece. It's not an invoice, but it's designed to make it look like it's a bill. Imagine how many of these come into different companies and the person just pays them because they think it's the bill, when really what they're doing is signing up to have a listing for their company in some sort of Yellow Page phone book. And I should point out, this actually isn't the Yellow Pages that are used in the community where this business is located. It's just a directory that someone else is printing, but mostly what they're doing is trying to sell the advertising space. I think it's very unethical, but it's legal. One of the reasons it's legal is because the use of the Yellow Page symbol, the little walking fingers that are so prominent, that image is no longer trademarked. No one owns it. It's in the public domain, and any company can use it. And they do, to deceive people into purchasing things that they don't mean to. Here's another example. This is something that came to my house. It showed up in the mail one day. I didn't open it, but my wife casually mentioned, "Oh, we got the bill for the internet domains today." That was a red flag for me because I always pay online for the internet domains that I own. Upon reading the letter, it was clear this was a solicitation. The company knew when my domain names expired and were trying to get me to switch to another provider, but they positioned their marketing in the form of something that looked like an invoice. And again, how many times do people sign up for something or pay the invoice and they're inadvertently signing up for something that they don't want? Again, this stuff is legal, but it's not ethical. Now, when we first started our online course, we talked about the definition of marketing is figure out what people want and need, and then how you can deliver that to them. But the question is, if you're tricking people into doing things that they don't intend to do, is that really marketing? There are a variety of other companies that have been engaged in questionable marketing communications. Publishers Clearinghouse is a company that primarily sells magazine subscriptions, but they also have prize drawings where people can win millions of dollars by entering contests. Now, that in itself isn't legal, but what Publishers Clearinghouse has been accused of sometimes is the unethical marketing communications practices. For example, it might not always be clear that you don't actually have to subscribe to the magazines in order to be entered into the drawings, but a lot of people don't understand that. The attorney generals in some states have gotten together and forced some changes with the marketing communications that's occurring. One of the things that Publishers Clearinghouse has to do now is work to identify people that spend an extraordinary amount of money on magazine subscriptions, people that spend hundreds and hundreds of dollars per quarter, for example, which are often elderly people, and they've been asked to exclude those persons from their marketing efforts. So they haven't really changed the marketing per se, but they have had to change some of the audience of whom they're marketing to. What about companies that market herbal cigarettes? Now, herbal cigarettes are not regulated by the FDA. They don't contain nicotine, and they don't have all the marketing and sales restrictions that regular tobacco products do. But they're packaged and communicated to you in ways using very bright colors and things, which they've been accused of these packages appealing to children. If you know your product is doing that, if you know your way of communicating is appealing to children or other audiences that shouldn't be using your product, is that ethical? As an aside, I just want to show some warning labels that have been proposed for cigarette packaging in the United States. The labels would be very, very graphic and use not just words, but images to try to dissuade people from smoking. There are several I'm going to show you here, but imagine if you worked in marketing communications for the tobacco company. You're trying to put images on your package to dissuade people from buying your product, but yet your goal of marketing is to get people to buy the product. Here's another one. Here's another one. And another one. It's really quite a quandary. And the FDA proposal says that these wouldn't be small labels on cigarette packaging. Here's a sample of essentially how it would look. The graphic labels would take up approximately half of the package of cigarettes. Now, where does this stand? Well, it was originally to be implemented in the fall of 2012, but various lawsuits by the tobacco companies have delayed the implementation of the new warning labels. The injunction that the tobacco companies got was actually based on the ground of free speech. In other words, packaging is speech, and that packaging should be allowed to convey things that don't dissuade your customer from buying your product. They feel that there is a vast difference between a warning label that is just words and one that uses graphic images. We'll see where this goes, but my point is, imagine again if you were working for the tobacco companies and how you would balance the needs to do what's right for your company to continue to sell your legal product, but also what obligations do you have to society to communicate the harmful effects of your product. And you could argue, why do we pick on the tobacco companies? Fast food is known to be unhealthful for you. High sodium, high fat content, high calories. I mean, who's to say we shouldn't have warning labels on hamburger wrappers? Or perhaps graphic labels. Maybe when you unwrap your hamburger, should there be a picture of a clogged artery? You can get very carried away with this logic, but really, where do we draw the line? Many things we consume aren't good for us. Which things should have the labels and which not? I digress a little bit, but it's a topic that's very important to think about in terms of marketing communications ethics. Let's look at what some of the pharmaceutical companies are doing with their marketing communications. Years ago, it used to be that the pharmaceutical companies marketed primarily to doctors. The doctors would then decide which drugs were correct for their patients or not. And there were some issues with that, certainly, because if you're giving doctors gifts or taking them on lavish trips, does that influence them to prescribe medications that they normally wouldn't otherwise? We'd hope not, but you have to wonder. But in recent years, pharmaceutical companies have been targeting their advertising at consumers, trying to get consumers to go to their doctors to request the specific medications for the ailments that they may or may not have. Of course, there are a lot of rules and regulations with pharmaceutical marketing, but the fact remains, what they're doing is perfectly legal. as long as the certain disclosures and things are followed. But is it always ethical? That's what we want to talk about today. Let's look at the difference between ethics and laws. Ethics are moral principles and values. They're guidelines on how to act. I always say, you can't get arrested for unethical behavior. It might not be right, it might not seem right, but you won't get arrested for it. Laws, however, are society's values that are enforceable in the courts. You can get arrested for illegal behavior. Sometimes it's easy to know which things are ethical and legal or unethical and illegal. There are a variety of ways of looking at it. Let's take a look at the next chart. Here in this quadrant, you can see we've got legality across the bottom and ethically along the margins. And you can see that we can break this into 4 quadrants. In the lower right-hand corner, you can see that there are many things that are done that are unethical but legal. Can you think of examples of things that would fit into that category? What about things that are legal and ethical? I would hope that most marketing communications would happen there. For example, a store advertises a sale or sends letters to customers marketing something or places ads in the paper. Probably legal and probably ethical. Think about things that are unethical and illegal. Imagine a liquor store where running ads aimed at high school seniors talking about buying your booze for prom with a discount or something. Well, that's certainly illegal. You can't advertise alcohol products to minors, and most people would say that's very unethical as well. Sometimes things seem unethical, but they're actually legal. Imagine on one Saturday, you go to a store and buy a new big screen television. The clerk doesn't tell you that if you'd wait till tomorrow, till Sunday, the item would go on sale and you could save hundreds of dollars. It's not legal for them to have to tell you that, but is it unethical if they don't? In the past, some credit card companies got into trouble for marketing, sending invoices that showed only the minimum amount of payment due, not the total balance owed. That was legal, but very questionable ethics. Laws have since been changed to prevent that. It's a little harder to think of things that could be ethical but illegal. But think about this. Imagine a group of pharmacies in a certain community were concerned about the high costs of drugs and got together and decided that they would all charge the same price for certain medications. It'd be their way of making sure that no one was being gouged on prices and hopefully lowering prices for everyone in the community. Sounds very ethical, but guess what? That would be illegal because you can't meet with your competitors to set your prices, or all kinds of antitrust legislation would kick in. Here's a situation that I was personally involved with at one point in my career. I was working for a home mortgage company, and someone approached us with an offer, and what they said was, for homes that were for sale for different real estate firms, we could buy the rights to have little stickers, little 800 numbers on the for sale signs, and it would direct people who were interested in obtaining information about that phone to an 800 number where they could hear a recording. So in other words, you're driving past a house that you would like some more information about, you call the number, and you hear information. How many bedrooms, how many bathrooms, what year the home was built, etc., etc. It sounds like a great thing. It did to us. But our question was, well, how does this really help us with our sell mortgages? What's in it for us? And here's what the company said. Here's the great deal. When customers call that 800 number, they hear the recording, get the information, but their phone number is captured through caller ID, and they give the phone numbers back to us. Now we know who called for information on the homes, and the idea was we could turn around and call the customers and ask about their mortgage needs. So in other words, customers were calling something in good faith, thinking they were just getting information, but really what it was a marketing mechanism to turn around and try to sell them mortgage products. It didn't feel right for our company. We had a lot of discussions about it, and we knew that if we didn't do this, some of our competitors probably would. And therein is the dilemma sometimes. Sometimes you can do what's ethically right and lose business, or you can push the envelope a little bit and stand to gain business, but you're still not doing things that are illegal. And after all, what's the point of a company? A for-profit company is to make money, and the point of marketing is to increase sales. How good of a marketing communication professional are you if you do things that reduce your sales or cause sales to go to your competitors? No easy answers on this stuff. I've worked for other companies where there were strict rules and regulations about gifts that you could accept from vendors who were trying to market themselves to your company. In other words, sometimes in addition to the advertising and the sales promotion and the direct marketing and all the things that another company does to try to get your business, one of the things they'll do sometimes is try to give you gifts to sway your opinion. This company had very strict rules on the acceptance of gifts. That's pretty black and white. But what is it when a company says, we'd like you to come to a sales presentation? Oh, and by the way, it's in Cancun and we'll pay your expenses. Well, that's really a gift, but it's under the guise of a meeting. But is that ethical marketing? Let's look at why people act unethical. One of the big reasons is trying to serve different constituents. You have your customers that you care about and need to do right by, but you also have stockholders and investors and others. Sometimes it's not always easy to balance the differing points of view. Or imagine if you're a salesperson. Remember, sales falls under the marketing communications umbrella. But if you're a salesperson working on commission and you have a family to feed, and you know that you can sometimes do things that are a little bit unethical to make the sale, and you need the sale because that's the only way your family eats, sometimes that can influence how we feel. Or what if you have a boss standing over your shoulder telling you if you don't meet your quota this month, you're gone? That certainly can influence you to do things that you might not otherwise do. People also act unethical because societies have different rules and values and cultures and laws. In the United States, for example, bribery is illegal. And it's actually illegal for domestic companies that do business in other countries to engage in bribery either. But what do you do if you're operating in another country where bribery is just the way that things get done? And that's how it works sometimes. Another company I worked for had an operation in Santiago, Chile. And when they were trying to expand this operation, realized the only way it was going to happen is if you make payments to the right people. It's very unethical in the United States to do that, and again, it's illegal, but in other countries, that's how things are done. We didn't make the poor decisions, of course, but some companies get into all kinds of trouble with doing this. And sometimes it's just poor role models. You know, we talk in sports how sometimes sports figures can be poor role models, or business leaders or business executives and things. But what about your own boss? When I was in high school, I worked for a fast food business. Our boss was very unethical in terms of things that he was stealing from the company, equipment and money and otherwise. And everyone knew that was going on. And there became this feeling, well, if the boss is doing it, that maybe it's not that big a deal to steal things once in a while. It's an interesting frame of mind. Or imagine, as your online instructor for this course, if I told you to go ahead and cheat. I wanted to make sure everyone got good grades, so just cheat and say you didn't. If I told you to do that, you'd know it was wrong, but because I'm the authority figure for this class and I told you to do it, it might influence your opinion. It's interesting to think about your own ethical behaviors, and we'll talk more about those here in a few minutes. A few things to know. One is the term caveat emptor. It's a Latin term. It means buyer beware. And up through about the 1950s and early 1960s in the United States, this was pretty much the model that marketing operated under. And if customers bought something and they felt they had been deceived or wrong, or the product wasn't what had been represented, it was pretty much buyer beware. Well, you should have done your homework. But in the 1960s, there was the implementation of the Consumer Bill of Rights. And this says that consumers have the right to safety, to know that the products they are buying are going to be free from things that harm them. They have the right to be informed and to know that the products they are buying, that they can obtain information about them, and that they aren't falsely represented. Campbell's Soup got into some interesting situations with this. They were doing ads, magazine ads, and in magazine advertising, you know that photography is very important, especially if you're showing a food product. Well, when you try to take a picture of a bowl of vegetable soup, the vegetables and other things go to the bottom and the broth floats to the top, and it doesn't look very appetizing. So what Campbell's, or rather their ad agency, did was fill up the bowl with marbles and then ladle the soup on top of the marbles so that the vegetables were suspended. It makes for a much more interesting picture, but they were accused of false advertising. They were misrepresenting the product, needed to change their advertising. Volvo is another company that got into trouble. Volvo's positioning used to be all about safety, that those were the safest cars there were, and they would do things with images to show that their car was safe. Here's an ad where they lined up a series of cars and drove a big truck over the tops of them. All of the cars were crushed, of course, except the Volvo. It makes their car seem very safe until you realize that that car that was used in the ad was actually a special reinforced model. It wasn't one like you or I would buy. So the ad was misleading, and like Campbell's Soup, Volvo got into trouble for not properly informing the public as to how the products work and react. There's the right to choose. The idea that competition is good. And so there are many laws to encourage competition and prevent monopoly situations. And there's also the right to be heard. If you have a complaint, if you have a grievance, you need to be able to voice that. And that's why on many products you see the 800 numbers or websites where you can call to leave your comments about products. But now we've been talking about the ethical behavior and ethical marketing communication issues of companies. But as an aside, sometimes it's interesting to look at your own behavior. And I ask you, is it ever okay to lie? I mean, the quick answer that most people would give is, well, no, you shouldn't lie. But then you can start thinking of all kinds of situations where we probably do. If your best friend buys an outfit, or downloads some music, or buys a vehicle, or does something and wants your opinion and says, hey, what do you think of my outfit? And you think it's hideous, or you think it's terrible music, or it's a car you would never buy. Do you truthfully tell them, I don't like it? Or do you lie a little bit? Say, yeah, it's okay. Or, if you like it, I like it. Why do we do that? Well, we're telling little lies because we think it will prevent someone's feelings from being hurt. And there you go. There are some times when people find it is okay to lie. What about situations where, let's say you were an emergency responder coming up on the scene of an accident, terrible accident, and the person in the accident looks at you and asks if they're going to be okay. And you really don't think that they are. But do you tell them that? Or do you say, help is on the way, hang in there, you're going to be okay? Is it lying if you only tell half of the truth? You see this in politics a lot. A politician may advertise that he or she voted to lower taxes 5 times, but perhaps don't tell you that they voted to raise taxes 10 times. But if they're only providing half of the truth, is that a lie? Or do you lie or cheat only if you know you won't get caught. How many people, when they're driving down the highway and see a cop up ahead, slow down? What does that say? You're really saying it's okay to speed unless you get caught. So again, there are many interesting situations you can ask yourself about your own ethical behavior. And I also want to point out that consumers have a responsibility too. As a consumer, have you ever thought about trying to return merchandise that you had perhaps worn or used if you didn't think that you would get caught doing it? What about fraudulent warranty claims? If I go to the store and buy a new laptop computer and drop it as I'm going up the steps in my home, might it be tempting to try to return it and to say that it just never worked from the beginning? Sometimes people figure out ways to get free cable or questionable downloads. Think about this. Let's say you're at a store and you're going through the checkout and the clerk rings up your sale wrong. They're charging you more than you know the item cost. Most people would say, stop, there's an error, and you'd check the price and you would make sure that you weren't paying more than you were supposed to. But what do you do if it works the other way? What if you see the item scanned and you realize they're charging less than it's supposed to be? Do you speak up then, or do you quietly let it go? What if you buy something, you charge it, and the bill never comes due? Now, if the bill comes due and you notice that they billed you twice or more than the amount you were supposed to pay, of course, almost everybody would call to complain. But suppose the bill never comes to begin with. Do you ever say anything? Do you have an obligation to the retailer or to the credit card company to point out that you owe them money? Let's look at the ethics of some professions. There are surveys done all the time looking at what professions are tops and bottoms in terms of ethics. Can you think of the professions that probably rate near the top? Nurses, pharmacists, medical doctors, high school teachers in a survey that I saw. And last in ethics, telemarketers, car sales personnel, advertising practitioners, Congress. No surprises there, but it's disappointing that the marketing communications profession, especially advertising practitioners and telemarketers, rate so lowly. And remember, sales is part of the marketing communications mix as well. Interesting stuff to look at. Now I want to show you some more examples. Here's a company, Sisley. It's a clothing manufacturer, and I actually don't know a lot about them, but I know that they have created some very controversial advertising. The women appear to be snorting cocaine. This is not an illegal ad, but you've got to question, what message are they sending? What are they trying to do here? Now, one of the things that they're probably trying to do is take a company with a relatively small ad budget and create some controversial advertising that gets attention and gets noticed. So they may have some ulterior motives. But again, look at the message that they're sending and the way that they do it. It's fun sometimes to look at things like magazine covers and how photos are retouched. This is Faith Hill on the cover of Red Book. You can see the photo on the left is the one that hasn't been touched, and the photo on the right that's in the magazine cover is actually the one that they used. If you look very closely, you can see where they did some touching to make Faith look a little better. Now, is that unethical? Think about pictures that you post of yourself on Facebook or other websites. Don't you want to use the best pictures you can? Have you ever used editing software to make yourself look better? On one hand, companies want to present the product in the best light possible. But where does that cross the line? In a way, how is this different from Campbell's soup, misrepresenting how the noodles float in a bowl of soup? There are many examples of things we could look at. Here's another magazine cover, and again, if you look closely, you can see how the model has been touched up. We can also look at the marketing communications that's done for retailers. Think about things that are done on Black Friday, the big shopping day, the day after Thanksgiving. Companies will advertise very low prices on certain items, create demand, get lines outside their stores, but they really don't have a wide variety of the products. They might only have a few of the laptops or televisions or whatever is being advertised. Is that ethical, to create this false sense of demand? By the way, sometimes when you buy specials at Good Friday sales, you don't realize that there may be derivative products. That is, the product you're buying might be slightly different from a product that would be normally priced, of the same brand or something. For example, if you're buying a television, it might have a lower resolution than other televisions, or a computer might not have all the peripherals and ports and things that a regular computer would. But a lot of customers buying these products don't really understand that that's the trade-off. Is that ethical? Finally, I want to show a campaign from a clothing company, United Colors of Benetton. It's an Italian clothing manufacturer, small ad budget, but they do very controversial advertising to get attention and to be noticed. Now, they had a campaign recently, and it was called Unhate, and it was how we're all underneath the colors of our skin and our race and everything, we're all one human race. Here's an ad showing hearts, white, black, yellow. The idea is we all look the same inside. Or the idea here is that two people of different races, but are all essentially that we're the same people. Here's Venezuelan President Hugo Chavez and Barack Obama. Now, of course, this image never occurred. They've made this up. And it's not illegal to do so. These are both public figures. You can do things with their photography, but they're doing things in a way that creates attention, or in some people, causes emotions. And finally, here's another one. The now deceased president of North Korea, kissing the president of South Korea. Two arch enemies coming face to face. Again, what's this got to do with marketing communications? These are ads. These are things that companies are doing, that they're promoting to try to get attention and to sell their product. A very unique advertising strategy. And it's fun to look at ethics. That concludes this lesson.